Bitcoin toll. On April 8, 2026, if you wanted to move 2 million barrels of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, here is what you had to do. First, email an IRGC-linked address with your vessel's AIS tracking data, flag registration, cargo manifest, crew list, and ownership records. Wait a few seconds. Receive a Bitcoin wallet address. Send up to $2 million in Bitcoin, irreversibly, untraceably, to that wallet. Then, and only then, receive an Iranian Navy escort through the northern corridor. The fee is $1 per barrel of crude. A fully loaded VLCC carrying 2 million barrels pays $2 million. Empty vessels transit free. Ships linked to the United States or Israel are denied passage entirely. Nations deemed friendly receive discounted rates. Iran ranks every country in the world on a 5-tier system and prices accordingly. Iran's parliament codified this system into law on March 30th and 31st, 2026, the Strait of Hormuz Management Plan. It was already operating before it became law. At current traffic levels, the toll generates up to $20 million per day from oil tankers alone. If LNG vessels are included, the estimate rises to $600 to $800 million per month. Hamid Hosseini, spokesman for Iran's Oil, Gas, and Petrochemical Products Exporters Union, confirmed the Bitcoin requirement to the Financial Times on April 8. His explanation for why Bitcoin specifically: it cannot be traced or confiscated due to sanctions. Unlike USDT or USDC, which have backdoor freeze functions that allow Tether and Circle to block any wallet at US. In government request, Bitcoin has no central issuer, no freeze function. Payments are irreversible. This is not a one-off stunt. It is the logical endpoint of a decade-long sanctions evasion playbook. Every method in this video is a step on the path that led here. Ghost ships. On February 5, 2026, the Indian Coast Guard intercepted 3 oil tankers approximately 100 nautical miles off the coast of Mumbai. The vessels, Asphalt Star, Stellar Ruby, and Al Jafsia, were engaged in ship-to-ship oil transfers in international waters. All 3 were under U.S. sanctions for transporting Iranian crude. All 3 had disabled their AIS transponders. All 3 carried falsified cargo manifests. This is the Shadow Fleet. As of early 2026, over 320 aging tankers operate outside the Western insurance system, regularly turning off their transponders, spoofing GPS positions, changing names and flags, and transferring cargo ship to ship at sea to launder the oil's origin. They carry no international Group P&I insurance. Most are registered under flags of convenience: Cameroon, Sierra Leone, Guyana, registries that have either been sanctioned or do not effectively exist. In March 2026, 29 Iranian Shadow Fleet tankers were anchored off Malaysia, awaiting cargo swaps before shipment to Chinese refineries. Their transponders showed positions near St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The Hormuz Bitcoin toll changed the Shadow Fleet calculus entirely. Ships that previously evaded detection by going dark must now actively contact Iranian authorities, submit their AIS data, ownership records, and cargo manifests, and pay. The IRGC is building a database of every ship, owner, cargo, and destination transiting the strait. Ships attempting transit without permission were warned by radio transmission. They will be destroyed. In December 2024, no 2 Shadow Fleet ships caused the worst Black Sea oil spill this century. Neither carried Western insurance. Neither had a legitimate flag state. No one was legally responsible for the cleanup. Crypto rails. In September 2025, OFAC designated 2 Iranian nationals and their associated cryptocurrency wallets. Alireza Darakhshan's addresses had received $442 million. Arash Estaki Alivan's had received $300 million, mostly USDT. Both operated front companies in Hong Kong and the UAE. Together, they coordinated the purchase of over $100 million in cryptocurrency using Iranian oil proceeds routed through those front companies. The IRGC processed over $3 billion in cryptocurrency in 2025 alone. Iranian crypto outflows hit $4.18 billion in 2024, up 70% year over year. By the fourth quarter of 2025, the IRGC controlled over 50% of Iran's entire crypto ecosystem. The infrastructure was built on 3 layers. First, e-conversion. Iranian oil proceeds enter the system through OTC brokers, typically in Southeast Asia, who convert cash or yuan into Bitcoin or USDT. Second, movement. Funds flow through mixers, chain hoppers, and decentralized exchanges to obscure the trail. Third, cash out. Funds exit through complicit exchanges, often rebranded after being shut down. Garantex, a Moscow-based exchange that processed $96 billion in transactions before being shut down in March 2025, rebranded as Grinex within weeks and continued operating. Iran chose Bitcoin specifically for the Hormuz toll because USDT has a backdoor. In June 2025, during the 12-day Israel-Iran war, hackers drained Iran's largest crypto exchange, Nobitex, of $90 million. Nobitex has since largely recovered. The IRGC entity learned from that incident and from watching OFAC freeze USDT wallets in real time, which is exactly why the Hormuz toll collects in Bitcoin and not stablecoins. Shell companies. In August 2025, OFAC sanctioned Cyrus Offshore Bank, a financial institution operating on Iran's Kish Island. Cyrus Offshore Bank had no real operations. It was secretly run by Parshan Bank, one of Iran's largest private banks, as a special license entity specifically designed to move Iranian oil proceeds through China's Bank of Kunlun and outside normal oversight mechanisms. The structure is the skeleton of every sanctions evasion method in this video. A shell company has no employees, no office, no operations. It exists only on paper, registered in secrecy havens: British Virgin Islands, Cyprus, Cayman Islands, Hong Kong. Sanctioned entities stack these in layers across multiple countries. Unwinding who actually controls the money requires tracing 5, 10, or 20 corporate entities across multiple jurisdictions. OFAC's 50% rule states that any entity 50% or more owned by a sanctioned person is itself sanctioned. So Iran structures ownership at 49%, or splits it across multiple proxies, each below the threshold. The IRGC Quds Force runs front companies specifically across Hong Kong and the UAE for two purposes: procuring goods that Iran cannot import directly due to sanctions, and transferring funds outside SWIFT. The entity collecting Bitcoin tolls at Hormuz, the unnamed IRGC-linked intermediary that receives the email from ship operators, is almost certainly built on this same shell company infrastructure. TRM Labs noted in April 2026 that the toll collection entity remains publicly unidentified, describing it as a critical gap for any future enforcement or sanctions action targeting the payment network. The ships submit their ownership records to this entity. The entity knows who owns every vessel transiting the strait. Ghost banks. In 2014, BNP Paribas paid $8.9 billion, the largest sanctions fine in history. The bank had processed $8.8 billion in concealed transactions for Iran, Sudan, and Cuba. Employees stripped sanctioned names from SWIFT wire transfer messages before routing them through U.S. correspondent banks. Internal communications showed employees explicitly writing instructions not to mention their name in New York. BNP was not alone. HSBC paid $1.9 billion in 2012 for processing $660 million in prohibited Iran, Cuba, and Sudan transactions. Bank employees inserted dots and dashes into payment messages to obscure the origin. Standard Chartered paid over $1 billion across two separate settlements, $667 million in 2012 and $1 billion in 2019, for processing over $250 billion on Iran's behalf across 60,000 transactions. Halk Bank, a Turkish state bank, disguised Iranian oil proceeds as food and medicine purchases, sanctions-exempt categories, to move billions through the Turkish banking system. A former executive was convicted in U.S. federal court in 2018. Total bank sanctions fines since 2000, over $18 billion. By 2012, the scale of enforcement had made Western banks unwilling to process any Iranian transactions, regardless of whether they were legally permitted. Iran lost access to the global correspondent banking system almost entirely. The $18 billion in fines did not stop Iranian oil exports. It forced Iran to invent every other method in this video. Fake paper. In 2011, the U.S. Treasury designated Lebanese Canadian Bank as a primary money laundering concern. The bank had processed hundreds of millions of dollars for Hezbollah through a network of used car dealers operating across West Africa, the United States, and Latin America. The mechanism was over-invoicing and under-invoicing of consumer goods. Inflate or deflate prices on trade documents to transfer value invisibly across borders. No cash moved, just paper. Trade-based money laundering works because trade is enormous and inspections are rare. Only 1 to 2% of the world's 250 to 300 million shipping containers are physically inspected. A tanker carrying 2 million barrels of Iranian crude can be invoiced as carrying 1 million barrels of Malaysian blend crude, and the difference is value transferred invisibly. Iran routes oil proceeds through networks of fake invoices and trade documentation to convert rials into dollars, euros, and crypto. Phantom shipments, paperwork for goods that do not exist, multiple invoicing, billing the same cargo repeatedly to different buyers, under-invoicing to move excess value to the buyer, over-invoicing to move excess value to the seller. The Hormuz Bitcoin toll introduced a new variant of this in real time. Ships must email their cargo manifest to Iranian authorities as part of the toll process. A tanker carrying 2 million barrels has a $2 million toll bill. The incentive to falsify cargo declarations to claim 500,000 barrels instead of 2 million is immediate and enormous. FinCEN issued an alert in October 2024, specifically warning about Hezbollah-linked trade-based money laundering networks operating through free trade zones in West Africa, Europe, and South America. The same networks are still operating. Third countries. industry. Shandong province in northeastern China contains dozens of small independent oil refineries known as teapot refineries. They are not publicly traded. They are not subject to Western financial oversight. They buy Iranian crude invoiced as a Malaysian blend. Oil whose origin has been laundered through ship-to-ship transfers, AIS spoofing, and falsified port documentation. In 2025, these teapot refineries absorbed the majority of Iran's 1.4 to 1.8 million barrels per day in dark fleet exports. The routing goes: Iranian crude loads at Karg Island with AIS off. Tanker transfers cargo ship to ship in Malaysian or Omani waters to a second vessel. Second vessel proceeds to Shandong with documentation showing Malaysian origin, where teapot refinery pays through Bank of Kunlun in yuan via SIPS, China's alternative to SWIFT. In April 2026, Iran offered a live, real-time version of this mechanism at the Hormuz toll itself. Pakistan reached out to commodity traders to offer temporary reflagging of their vessels as Pakistani, one of the 5 nationality tiers that receives a discounted toll rate. Iran allowed 20 Pakistani vessels through the strait. Pakistan has only a few flagged ships in the Gulf, so Islamabad contacted the world's largest commodity trading firms to ask if their vessels could sail under Pakistani flags temporarily. Shenzhen Jasibo Technology supplied dual-use military goods to Iran in 2025 through mislabeled cargo and circuitous shipping routes via Hong Kong Alpha Trading, designated by OFAC alongside its principals. The UAE's Jebel Ali Free Zone has been the transit point for billions in sanctioned goods across multiple countries and sanctions regimes. Lighter customs oversight and opacity around beneficial ownership make free trade zones the preferred transshipment infrastructure for every country under sanctions. Parallel world. The Hormuz Bitcoin toll accepts 2 forms of payment: Bitcoin, irreversible, untraceable, no central issuer, or Chinese yuan routed through Bank of Kunlun via CIPS, China's cross-border interbank payment system, entirely outside SWIFT. CIPS processed $17 trillion in transactions in 2023, growing 27% year-over-year with over 1,600 participants. Iran's own payment messaging system, CIMS-RUNC, connects to CIPS and was built specifically to circumvent SWIFT. OFAC sanctioned Cyrus Offshore Bank in August 2025 specifically for using Bank of Kunlun and CIMS-RUNC to move Iranian oil proceeds. Bank of Kunlun was designated by OFAC years earlier. It continues operating within China. Russia operates SPFS as its SWIFT alternative. Iran operates CIMS-RUNC. China operates CIPS. Over 50 nations have expressed interest in BRICS Pay, a planned decentralized payment system that, if implemented, removes the final lever of dollar-denominated sanctions pressure. The ceasefire brokered by Pakistan on April 7th and 8th, 2026 was itself negotiated through Pakistan, a CIPS participant. Iran's 10-point peace proposal explicitly demands the lifting of sanctions and continuation of its oil export infrastructure. Hawala, the ancient trust-based money transfer system that predates modern banking, handles the last mile. Crypto and yuan move the oil revenue at scale. Hawala distributes it as cash to field commanders. The IRGC Quds Force supplied $800 million in cash to Ansar Exchange through Dubai-based currency exchange houses. That cash reached Houthi commanders in Yemen. The Strait of Hormuz Bitcoin toll is not the end of the story. It is the proof of concept. Iran has demonstrated that a sanctioned state can weaponize a maritime choke point, collect billions in cryptocurrency, route payments through Chinese banking rails, distribute cash through centuries-old informal networks, and keep its entire oil industry running, all while under the most comprehensive sanctions regime in history.